Boston, quarterfinal night. Kylian Mbappé steps up to take a penalty kick. He misses. For most players, this is the moment everything falls apart. One mistake, in front of millions of people, that can ruin an entire tournament. The kind of moment that gets replayed over and over, that follows a player home. But Mbappé isn't most players. A few minutes later, he does something incredible. A brilliant solo goal, the kind that makes people forget the missed penalty completely. He beats defenders like they're standing still and finishes with total confidence. Then, just as the crowd is still recovering, he sets up a second goal for his teammate. France wins the match. They're through to the semifinals, just 2 matches away from the World Cup final itself. This is the story of how Kylian Mbappé got here, how a missed penalty became just a footnote in his tournament instead of the headline, and what it would actually mean for him, for France, and for football history if he goes on to win the whole thing in 2026. To understand why this moment matters so much, we have to go back almost a decade. In 2017, Mbappé is just a teenager playing for a small French club called Monaco. But he's scoring goals like someone twice his age, fast, fearless, and completely unbothered by pressure that would crush most young players. Every major club in Europe takes notice. Real Madrid wants him, Manchester clubs want him. But in the end, it's Paris Saint-Germain, the biggest club in his own hometown, that wins the race to sign him. Overnight, he becomes the most expensive teenager in the history of football. 1 year later, in 2018, he plays in his first World Cup. He's only 19 years old, an age where most players are still fighting just to get on the field for their country, let alone lead the attack. He scores an unforgettable goal against Argentina, sprinting past defenders in a moment that gets replayed for years afterward. Then, in the final itself, against Croatia, he scores again. France wins the World Cup. Mbappé becomes one of the youngest players in history to score in a World Cup final. Most players spend their entire careers chasing one moment like that. He got his before he even turned 20. After a moment like 2018, there's always a question that follows a young player around. Was that real, or was it luck? So for the next few years, Mbappé sets out to answer that question in the only way that matters, by doing it again and again. He wins Golden Boot awards for being the top scorer in competitions. He wins league titles with his club year after year. He comes agonizingly close to winning the biggest prize in European club football, the Champions League. Behind the scenes, his future becomes one of the longest-running transfer sagas in football, years of speculation, headlines, and will he won't he stories about where he'll play next. Eventually, it's Real Madrid, one of the most successful clubs on the planet, that finally signs him. By the time that transfer happens, the conversation around Mbappé has completely changed. Nobody is asking anymore whether he's a great player. They're asking whether he might become the greatest player of all time. But to really understand what 2026 means to him, we need to talk about the tournament that came before it and the heartbreak that came with it. The year is 2022, the World Cup final. France against Argentina. Argentina takes the lead. Then they take a second lead. For most of the match, France barely threatens at all. It looks like it's going to be a comfortable, one-sided win for Argentina and their captain, Lionel Messi. Then Mbappé takes over. In the space of just a couple of minutes late in the game, he scores twice to level the score completely. It's one of the most explosive comebacks in World Cup history, and it sends the match into extra time. In extra time, Argentina scores again to retake the lead. It looks over, but Mbappé isn't done. He scores a third goal, a hat-trick, meaning 3 goals in a single match, something that had almost never happened before in a World Cup final, to tie the game once more, right at the very end. 3 goals in the biggest match of his life, and somehow it still isn't enough. The match goes to penalty kicks. Argentina wins. Lionel Messi lifts the World Cup trophy. Mbappé walks away with an individual award for scoring the most goals in the entire tournament. But no trophy. Nothing to show for arguably the greatest individual performance ever produced in a World Cup final. Imagine that, scoring 3 goals in the biggest game of your career and still losing. That kind of heartbreak doesn't just disappear after the final whistle. It follows a player into the next season, into the next tournament. It sits there, waiting to either be healed or repeated. Now it's 2026, a new World Cup, hosted across the United States, Mexico, and Canada. A new France team, with a new generation of players around him. Mbappé isn't the fearless young rookie anymore, the 19-year-old surprising everyone. He's the captain now, the senior leader. Other players look to when things get difficult. Which brings us right back to where this video started, the missed penalty in Boston and the response that followed just minutes later. That single moment says everything about who he's become, a player who treats a mistake as a minor inconvenience, not as something that defines him. The 19-year-old in 2018 might have let that miss get in his head. The captain in 2026 simply moves on and scores anyway. Right now, France sits 2 wins away from the World Cup trophy. 2 matches between Mbappé and a second World Cup title won on a different continent, 4 years after the first one. And depending on how the other half of the tournament plays out, there's a real chance of a final rematch against the only man still standing ahead of him in the greatest of all-time conversation, Lionel Messi. Take a step back and look at the full picture. The teenager who scored in a World Cup final at 19 years old. The player who scored 3 goals in a final, a hat-trick, and still walked away with nothing. And now, the captain, standing 2 wins away from doing something almost nobody his age has ever managed, winning the World Cup twice. Some of the greatest players in history, like Pelé, won multiple World Cups while they were still incredibly young, and were immediately treated as the standard everyone else got compared to. Other legends, like Messi and Ronaldo, spent decades chasing a first World Cup that, for a long time, looked like it might never come at all. Mbappe's story doesn't match either of those paths. He won his first World Cup faster than almost anyone in the history of the sport. Now he's chasing his second, carrying the weight of a final he should have won, still sitting on his shoulders. If France goes all the way this time, if Mbappé lifts this trophy as the captain, not the supporting teenager everyone remembers from 2018, but the leader of the team, then the conversation about where he stands in football history doesn't just continue, it changes completely. 2 games left, 1 chance to close the gap for good.
If you're not subscribed yet, this is exactly the kind of story we tell every week. The moments in football that go deeper than the scoreline. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if France makes that final, you already know we'll be back to break it down. Drop a comment. Do you think Mbappé closes the gap on Messi this tournament, or does history repeat itself?